Number 10. Roberto Tejada. This armored truck guard worked as a driver for Miracle Delivery Services until when he decided to steal $800,000 in cash. He was more intelligent than your average armored truck driver turned thief since he stole the money over several months to avoid detection. He also tried to alter documents to account for all the missing cash. It didn't work in the end, but at least he put in some effort. Police discovered that Tejada used some cash to buy 5 brand new 2021 cars for his family members. Unfortunately, the police don't recognize Robin Hood-like acts of charity as a valid excuse. Buying 5 new cars with stolen cash isn't a great way to avoid detection, is it? The police took all the cars and the cash, which he was keeping in his bedroom. Number 9. Mark Nicholas Espinoza. Garda, the armored truck company, doesn't publicly post how much their drivers make. But according to job website Indeed.com, the average starting pay for Garda drivers is $12.46 an hour. Does that seem like a good idea, considering you hired these people to drive around with bags of money? You're practically asking your employees to try something, aren't you? Mark Nicholas Espinoza, unsatisfied by his $12.46 an hour, stole more than $900,000 during a routine pickup and delivery in Kentucky. Espinoza was supposed to meet his partner on the other side of the mall they collected cash from. But instead of driving the bulletproof armored truck to the meeting spot, he disappeared. Well, he tried to anyway. The truck was abandoned in the mall parking lot, but Espinoza and the cash were gone. He was later arrested near Hartford, Connecticut, where he'd been living there under the false identity of Sam Smith. Not the most creative fake name, huh? He apparently bought a Chevrolet Malibu 5 days after the theft, which is also not the most creative car you would buy with $900,000. He was probably trying to keep a low profile, but clearly it wasn't low enough. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison after pleading guilty. He, of course, had to pay Garda back. Number 8. Traffic jam. An armored truck on its way to San Diego caused an unexpected traffic problem when money started flying out the back of it. You can have all the bulletproof glass you want, but it really doesn't matter if you leave the door unlocked and bags of money rained onto the street. The bills that came out were mostly 1s and 20s, but it was still enough to bring traffic to a screeching halt. People stopped their cars, got out, and grabbed as much cash as possible. Videos from the lucrative traffic jam were posted all over social media and made cable news. California Highway Patrol eventually shut down the highway until they could clear the scene. Only 2 people ended up getting arrested. They got caught because they locked themselves out of their cars in their rush to grab all this free money. 2 of them were just standing there like idiots when the cops showed up. Everyone else had already driven off. It isn't known precisely how much money was lost and how much people actually got away with. According to police, there was less than $1 million in the truck. Anyone who grabbed the money and didn't return it committed a crime. Number 7. Inside job. Not all armored truck heists are amateurish attempts where employees just grab what they can and run. Sometimes there's a bit more strategy involved. 3 people were charged in a Brinks armored truck robbery in 2021, and one of them was the driver. The driver told the company and the police that he had been attacked while getting coffee at a gas station. He said one guy held him up while another took all the money out of the truck. There was security footage to back up his story too. However, when police found the people who robbed the truck, they realized both robbers knew the driver. To make matters worse, the driver was in on it. They planned on splitting the money 3 ways, but all didn't go according to plan. This is actually a fairly common tactic. It's not the first time it's been tried, and it's not even the first time it's been tried by people who work for Brinks. In 2019, a different Brinks driver told detectives that a man in a motorcycle helmet robbed him at gunpoint and stole all the cash. When the mysterious motorcycle man got caught, it turned out to be the driver's friend. Apparently, it's a little harder to stage a robbery than people think. Number 6. Release the reports. In 2018, a man built his own armored vehicle and stopped traffic for an hour and a half on a bridge near the Hoover Dam. He had a gun and a sign that said, "Release the OIG report," which is some conspiracy theory reference. The driver, Matthew P. Wright, was eventually arrested and charged with obstruction of a highway, endangerment, unlawful flight from law enforcement, misconduct involving a weapon, and terrorist acts. Highway 93 had to be shut down, other cars were evacuated, and tourists at the Hoover Dam were told to shelter in place. Police sent multiple armored units to the scene. The madman decided to leave and headed towards Arizona. However, he ran into a roadblock of tractor trailers the cops set up. He made a U-turn and attempted to drive the other way instead, but he ran over spike strips and popped his tires. Surprisingly, this was not the end of his conspiracy adventure. He drove his armored car off the highway and made it 3 miles away from the road before being surrounded by police. He ended up surrendering peacefully. In a certain sense, he won since many people saw his sign and it ended up in lots of YouTube videos like this one. But in a much more real sense, he lost because he's in jail and can no longer read about conspiracies on the internet. Number 5. Brian Johnson. You don't have to be a real armored truck driver to pull off one of these heists. All you need is a little bit of imagination and some clothes that make it look like you're an armored truck driver. In 2015, Brian Johnson walked into a Walmart dressed like a Loomis armored vehicle driver. He wore all black, a hat, and a tactical-looking vest with many pockets. It looked close enough. He walked right in, signed for the money, and then left. When the actual Loomis employee showed up about 45 minutes later, the Walmart employees realized something was up. They'd just given $75,000 to the wrong guy. When the police caught Johnson, they discovered his getaway driver was the Walmart manager's stepdaughter, Maria Bustamante. The manager's name was Rico Robertson, and police arrested him too, figuring he had something to do with it. It turns out they were right. Robertson planned the whole thing. However, police dropped the charges against Robertson a year later after he suffered a stroke and couldn't stand trial. Johnson, our wannabe armored truck driver, was never caught and by all accounts is still at large today, along with the money he stole. He's wanted for the Walmart heist and several crimes in California, including a shooting. Number 4. Robbed and fired. Getting robbed is probably the worst thing that can happen as an armored truck driver. Getting fired is perhaps the second worst thing that can happen. Unfortunately, Sabrina Gimeno got to experience both when she was robbed and then subsequently fired. A 7-year veteran driver for Brink's Armored Trucks, Gimeno was returning to her vehicle with bags of cash. It stopped being a routine stop when 3 masked gunmen jumped out of an SUV. In the surveillance video, you can see one of them keeping a weapon on her while the others grabbed the money. In the end, they made off with $100,000. Just a few days later, she got fired. Brink said she violated protocol and never gave her, the news, or anyone else a better explanation. Maybe Brink suspected that Gimeno was somehow been involved in the robbery and the whole thing was an inside job. After all, it wouldn't be the first time drivers have pulled that classic scheme. Gimeno denies having any sort of involvement. Unless it was the greatest indie job of all time, the video doesn't back up that theory. Gimeno was forced to the ground and feared for her life. All she could think about was her 3 kids who depended on her at home. Most inside jobs don't put the driver directly in harm's way. Number 3. Dan Kennedy. In 2015, a Utah man named Dan Kennedy saw a large orange bag in the middle of the highway. He pulled over and grabbed it, thinking it could be a traffic hazard. When he grabbed it, he realized it was heavier than it looked. When he opened it, he realized why. The bag fell out of an armored truck and was full of cash. It's unclear how much money was in there, but news outlets reported it weighed 75 pounds, so let's do some simple math. Paper US dollars weigh precisely 1 gram, according to the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. There are roughly 453.6 grams in a pound. So if that bag was full of $1 bills, it would be worth $34,000. According to Kennedy, the 4-foot-tall bag was full of smaller bags containing 50s and 100s. So if all 75 pounds were in 50s, he'd be holding just over $1.7 million, give or take, for the weight of the bags. Kennedy, who is morally superior to nearly everyone else on this list, tried to track down the armored truck and return the money. When that didn't work, he just called the police. When they showed up, they were stunned by the amount of cash. How do you manage to lose a 75-pound bag of money? The driver said they hit a bad bump in the road and the back door came open by mistake. Either these armored trucks aren't as secure as they should be, or the roads in Utah are wild. Number 2. Larry Brooks. He had a horrible day at his new job as an armored truck guard. If he hadn't gotten caught, it could have been the best day of his life. He tried to steal $100,000 in cold, hard cash on his first day. Maybe he should have waited longer to develop a better plan because the company caught him red-handed on their security cameras. He was arrested and charged with second-degree theft. The company he worked for, Garda, recovered $86,000 from a car parked near Larry's house. Then they contacted the police. Now, before anyone judges Larry too hard, they should ask themselves, could I resist taking huge stacks of cash just sitting there? Well, some people evidently can, since not all guards get arrested. After this incident, it's safe to assume Garda was a little more careful in their hiring process. Number 1. Bathabil Mlangeni. While working for SBV Secure Collections in South Africa, Bathabil decided to loot the cash she was supposed to protect. While at a pickup depot at the Mall of Africa, Bathabil used a pair of scissors to slice open 2 bags of cash. Then, she stuffed about 4 million South African rands into garbage bags and left before anyone knew it happened. Her brazen theft occurred in July 2019, and she remained on the run for the next 3 years. Nobody knew what happened to her, where she'd gone, or where she stashed the cash. Her mother remained adamant that Pablito could never commit such a crime. According to Mama Mlanjeni, her daughter would never steal a penny. A neighbor told police she showed up at his house in December 2019 and stayed for a few days before hitting the road again. He had no idea she was wanted for the robbery. Police thought they were close when other neighbors claimed they saw Pablito at her sister's wedding. However, Mama Mlanjeni spoke up again, denying everything the neighbors said. She hadn't seen her daughter since she allegedly stole the money in July. Oddly, the family never filed a missing persons report, which is strange for being so convinced she's innocent. They spent a majority of the COVID pandemic wondering what happened to her. Then, she turned up in January 2022. Now in prison and refusing bail, Pablito awaits her future in a South African holding facility. Perhaps mask mandates and other restrictions allowed her to hide in plain sight. After all, her face was plastered across every tabloid in the country. Even though police caught up to her, they never recovered the money. Maybe she spent it all at the Mall of Africa? Click here to watch one of these next videos.
Here are a few of the most corrupt policemen around the world. Number 10. Genaro Garcia Luna. He was one of Mexico's most celebrated cops, known as the face of the country's war on drug cartels and a valued confidant for U.S. counter-narcotics officials. He led Mexico's Federal Investigation Agency from 2001 to 2005 and served as Secretary of Public Security from 2006 to 2012. He worked closely with the DEA to eliminate corruption in the Mexican police force and stop the passage of drugs to the United States. He fired hundreds of police officers for corruption in Mexico, until it came out that he himself was corrupt. People started getting suspicious when it came out that he staged a police raid of kidnapping victims in front of a television crew. He also had numerous luxury homes, which seemed strange for a law enforcement officer's salary. Mexican journalist Anabel Hernandez was one of the first to reveal Luna's corruption and received threats on her life. She filed complaints with Mexico's Human Rights Commission, accusing Luna of attempting to hire federal police officers to take her out. In 2019, Luna was arrested and charged with accepting millions in bribes from the Sinaloa drug cartel, previously run by none other than Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. In exchange for briefcases full of cash, Luna helped the Sinaloa cartel transport products and gave them classified information about ongoing investigations. He was charged with 3 counts of conspiracy to traffic illegal substances and 1 count of making false statements. A former cartel member testified against him, saying that the bribes began in 2005. Luna was one of the highest-ranking officials in Mexico to be indicted for trafficking in the U.S. judicial system. His previous legacy as a hero in Mexico's war on the cartels is forever stained. Number 8. Michael Dowd. Michael Dowd joined the New York Police Department in 1982 during the 80s drug epidemic. He was assigned to the state's 75th precinct, dealing with over 100 violent crimes per year. He saw how much money could be made in drug dealing, much more than his meager $600 per week salary with the NYPD. Within his first year on the job, he started accepting bribes. He started stealing cash from crime scenes. However, stealing turned into robbing dealers and selling drugs himself. In 1986, he began working for a dealer named Adam Diaz, who was bringing in more than $1 million per week. The Diaz organization paid Dowd $24,000 in exchange for intel about possible police raids, transporting narcotics around the city, and providing dealers with guns and badges. Dowd became a regular employee, making $8,000 per week, with an additional profit for selling drugs on the side. Dowd felt invincible and brought other police officers into the corruption ring, including his partner, Ken Urell. But the euphoria didn't last long. Suffolk County investigators intercepted phone conversations between him and a drug dealer and discovered Dowd's double life. Police found and arrested Dowd and Urell while high and drunk on the clock. Urell agreed to wear a wire and record his conversations with Dowd in exchange for a lesser sentence. Dowd incriminated himself by talking about his plans to abduct a Colombian woman in exchange for $200,000 worth of product. He was indicted for conspiracy and drug-related charges, among other violent crimes. It was later revealed that the city ignored 16 complaints against Dowd in previous years. In 1994, he was convicted of racketeering and conspiracy to distribute narcotics. He was sentenced to 16 years in jail, but only served 12 and a half. Number 8. The Golden Throne. In July 2021, the Russian Investigative Committee, or SK, leaked a video showing a colossal mansion adorned with extravagant gold interiors. One of those items was a golden toilet. The SK is a Russian governmental agency modeled after the FBI. They conducted a police bribery probe and found that traffic police in the southern Stavropol region of Russia were taking bribes in exchange for fake business permits. These permits allowed drivers to pass through police checkpoints with unauthorized products of grain and construction materials. Police forces in Russia's North Caucasus collaborated in the anti-corruption investigation of southern Stavropol. SK conducted 80 searches of traffic police offices and homes and found vast amounts of cash, luxury villas, and sports cars. They were extravagant mansions with golden kitchens and, yes, a golden toilet. Head of traffic police in the region, Colonel Alexei Sofonov, was arrested along with his predecessor, Alexander Kinchinton, and 6 others. More than 35 traffic police officers in the area were detained due to the corruption scandal. Some politicians compared their operation to mafia activity, since they profited from the black market. It's estimated that Sofonov and his team made over 19 million rubles, or $255,000 in bribes. If found guilty, Sofonov could face up to 15 years behind bars. Number 7. The Mafia Cops. When the 5 families of the American Mafia ran New York City in the 1980s and 90s, they did so with the help of 2 NYPD officers. These 2 police officers, Stephen Caracappa and Louis Pablito, worked primarily for the Lucchese and Gambino crime families and became known as Mafia Cops. Caracappa worked in Brooklyn's organized crime unit and then as a private investigator until he retired in the 1990s. Pablito had family members in the Gambino crime family, but when he interviewed for the NYPD, he falsely claimed that he had no relation to the infamous mobsters. In 1983, Pablito was suspected and cleared of forwarding classified NYPD intel to a Gambino relative. By 1985, the federal government was aware of Caracappa and Pablito's involvement in organized crime in New York City. Both officers used illegal methods in conducting their police work. According to Mafia underboss Anthony Gaspipe Casso of the Lucchese family, he and mob boss Vittorio Vic Amuso paid the officers $375,000 in bribes dating back to 1985. They also paid Caracappa and Pablito to kidnap a member of the Gambino family as revenge for an attempted hit on Casso. Caracappa and Pablito then took the life of a member of the Lucchese family, who Casso suspected was an informant. Casso then ordered them to take out Gambino member Eddie Lino in retaliation for the passing of Paul Castellano. When the Mafia families were indicted in the mid-1990s, Caracappa and Pablito conveniently retired to Las Vegas, but remained involved in organized crime. Casso hired them to carry out a hit on the new head of the Gambino family, John Gotti, but the plan failed. There was another plan to take out Lucchese family underboss Stephen Crea and Gambino family underboss Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano. Gravano entered the witness protection program but was later arrested for drug trafficking before Caracappa and Pablito could get to him. After a long investigation, the Mafia Cops were arrested in 2005 and charged with racketeering, obstruction of justice, extortion, and 8 counts of murder. Pablito was sentenced to life imprisonment plus 100 years, and Caracappa was sentenced to life plus 80 years. Both passed away in prison. Number 6. Dmitry Zakharichenko. In Russia, an anti-corruption police officer was jailed for possessing more than $139 million in cash bribes. Colonel Dmitry Zakharichenko was the deputy chief for the General Directorate of Economic Security and Anti-Corruption at Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Then, he was found with 19 billion rubles worth of foreign currency at his properties in Moscow. The final bribe that took him down involved a seafood restaurant called La Mer, which faced health violations and failed inspections. Owner Mehdi Daus scheduled a meeting with Zakharichenko where the colonel demanded $5 million, which was eventually reduced to $800,000 in exchange for overlooking violations and canceling inspections. A few years later, he and a friend returned to the restaurant demanding discounts of up to 50% and racked up $46,000 in savings. In 2016, he further abused his power by warning a finance friend about incoming police searches to her property for tax evasion investigations. charges. Zakharichenko was arrested and found guilty of accepting large-scale bribes and obstructing justice and was sentenced to 13 years in prison with a $1.8 million fine. Number 5. Sei Kato. A former police officer in Kanagawa, Japan, named Sei Kato, went on trial for accepting bribes from funeral homes to set them up with families of the recently deceased. Whenever he received a call involving a dead body, he would call the funeral home so they could get the business. Kato probably didn't act alone. All 6 police stations that Kato was associated with were involved with the funeral home bribes. Kanagawa is unique in treating dead bodies because corpses are handled by private companies instead of by law enforcement. So that's why Kanagawa is the only area in Japan that faces this kind of corruption problem. Kato pleaded guilty and explained that he received the bribes via gift certificates, prepaid cards, and beer tickets. He received about 2 million yen worth of vouchers. Now, he faces up to 2.5 years of imprisonment. Number 4. Atushi Kubo. Kyoto, Japan is unique for its rich culture and history. All leadership positions in the city are prestigious. However, people still find ways to abuse their power. Kyoto police charged Atushi Kubo with bribery after accepting bribes while in charge of the Kyoto City Children and Youth Support. While auditioning a preschool, Kubo was accused of accepting a gold watch valued at almost $4,000 from the chairman of an association that oversees preschool facilities. While investigating Kubo, police also found a koban in his possession. Kobans are oval-shaped gold coins once used as currency in Japan's history. Even though this type of currency has been phased out, these coins are still used as status symbols and portrayed in pop culture. Number 3. John Joseph Connolly, Jr. John Joseph Connolly Jr. was an FBI agent who was convicted of racketeering and obstruction of justice related to his partnership with the infamous James Whitey Bulger. During his FBI career, Connolly mainly focused on organized crime. He was praised for his performance and dressed the part, but he wasn't the good guy he claimed to be. While law enforcement officers were trying to imprison Bulger, Connolly protected him and Steve Flemmi from prosecution by letting them know when the cops were coming. In 2005, he was indicted for taking the lives of John B. Callahan and Roger Wheeler. Bulger and Flemmi apparently ordered the hits after Connolly told them classified information about imminent police investigations that could incriminate them. Over the years, Connolly received $230,000 from Bulger and Flemmi, but had to cut down his payments to avoid suspicion. In 2009, he was sentenced to 40 years in prison, but was granted a medical release at 81 years old in 2021. Physicians told the court that Connolly has about 1 year to live based on his diabetes and melanoma diagnosis. Number 2. Joe Ferrari. One day, Thai lawyer Citra Biebenkerd received a mysterious Facebook message from a junior police officer. It contained a link to security camera footage of a suspect being roughed up in police custody. Biebenkerd shared the video, and it went viral in Thailand. 6 police officers were quickly arrested in connection to the video. In the leaked security footage, Jirapong Thanapat, detained on suspicion of selling drugs, passed away while police tried to extort $82,000 from him. Some officers tried to resuscitate him, but it was too late. Rumors of Thanapat's death while in police custody were excused as a drug overdose, but the CCTV footage, with now over 5 million views, proved otherwise. The video was shocking and disturbing, but according to Biebenkerd, he had to share it with the public for one simple reason. Unless there's media attention and public outcry in Thailand, people don't investigate police crimes very quickly. The police chief involved, Colonel Thitisan Uthanofan, is thought to be the main offender. An investigation of his home revealed a huge estate with beautiful landscaping and several garages containing 29 luxury cars, hence his infamous new nickname, Joe Ferrari. His collection included a rare Lamborghini, a Ferrari, 4 Porsches, 6 Mercedes-Benz, 3 Audis, and a Bentley. Mr. Ferrari was accused of extortion and corruption and went on the run. All of Thailand looked for him until he eventually turned himself in to the police. Ferrari came from a modest family and had a meager $1,700 per month salary, nowhere near enough to afford all his luxury cars. But no one would have questioned it if not for the criminal case. He spent most of his career policing the illicit drug market and confiscating illegal luxury car imports. In the past decade, Mr. Ferrari seized 410 cars and received a cut of their sale price at auction, amounting to about $24 million. The video shocked the Thai public and encouraged them to call for police reform. Ferrari said he never intended to harm the suspect. He was charged with Thanapat's passing, deprivation of liberty, and abuse of power. Of course, he held a press conference where he denied all charges. Unfortunately, this is just the tip of the iceberg for Thailand's corrupt justice system. To learn more about how deep Joe Ferrari's corruption really ran, check out this full video. Number 1. Joseph Floyd. In 2012, Florida policeman Major Joseph Floyd of Crestview Police Department in Florida was indicted for harassing colleagues, forcing other officers to hurt suspects, forging incident reports, altering testimonies, soliciting certain favors from town residents, roughing up handcuffed suspects and prisoners, intimidating community members, and purposefully crashing his car into a pregnant woman's vehicle. The list goes on. Floyd joined the Crestview Police Force in 2007, despite abusing his power for more than a decade in other police forces. Before he became a policeman, he was arrested for battery, disorderly conduct, and assaulting a law enforcement agent. He was put in charge of the Crestview Street Crimes Unit, responsible for investigating drugs and gangs. His corruption began as soon as he took the job. He used excessive force whenever he got the opportunity and encouraged other officers to do the same. One time, he planted evidence on a suspect and charged him with possession. He also name-called and harassed female officers. One woman was so afraid of Floyd that she refused to press charges, fearing for her own safety. He staged drug busts for small quantities of marijuana for media attention and encouraged officers to plant drugs to get more prisoners in trouble. Officers were threatened with termination or demotion if they didn't follow his orders. He bragged about what he did to suspects and prisoners. He repeatedly told other officers that he didn't care about people's civil rights. Thankfully, he was sentenced to prison for 12 years in 2013. Unfortunately, this is hardly rare for Florida law enforcement. Many police officers who are under investigation for similar investigations are allowed to stay on the police force or even given second chances if convicted. In fact, this made up about 2% of all employed officers in Florida since 1988.
A vulture fund is what it sounds like. A fund that buys struggling debts such as a mortgage. What Catriona Carey would do is tell prospective clients that her firm would buy the distressed mortgage that they could never pay off. The client could keep their house. Carey would charge them interest for a long-term profit. But as you can guess, this isn't what happened. Catriona Carey was born in County Kilkenny, Ireland in 1977 or 78. Oddly, Carey's records aren't clear on her birth year. However, nobody's arguing her impact on women's sports in Ireland. Young Carey started playing stick and ball games like field hockey and camogie at a young age. Her older brother, DJ Carey, was an active athlete and went on to have a successful pro career of his own. Carey grew up playing with DJ, leading to a love of sports and competition. Carey made her career in 1998 when she signed onto the Ireland national field hockey team. She played in 72 matches over 7 years. Before she retired from the sport, Carey led her country to the 2005 Euro Hockey Nations Championship in Dublin. However, before her highly touted field hockey career, Carey played a sport called camogie. In Ireland, camogie is a popular stick and ball game played exclusively by women. The sport is quite similar to field hockey, so her skills transitioned well on the camogie field. She started playing professionally in 1992 when she joined the Clara GAA club. GAA standing for Gaelic Athletic Association. Camogie and hurling are sports invented in Ireland hundreds of years ago. So Carey wasn't just excelling at a popular sport, she participated in her country's cultural tradition. Both Carey and her brother DJ made names for themselves through these traditional sports. And after 14 years in Irish professional sports, Carey decided it was time to hang up the stick and helmet. Carey played sports almost all her adult life. Now, she was in her early 30s and needed a career change. Fortunately, Carey studied accounting in school, so DJ gave her a job at his cleaning company. He put her in charge of his company's finances because of her training and familial ties. He'd regret that decision 2 years later. Carey was charged with her first criminal offense in 2008, only 2 years after retiring from professional sports and working for her brother. Carey was forced to resign from DJ's company and pay a fine to the Revenue Commissioners, an Irish government agency that collects taxes and enforces the National Tax Code. Basically, they're the Irish IRS. They investigated Carey after she used her accounting skills to send them a falsified invoice from DJ's company. Their investigators traced the invoice back to Carey, who took the fall for the whole scheme. The Revenue Commissioners fined Carey $1,622 for trying to trick them. However, the ensuing court hearing revealed Carey's other financial crimes against the Revenue Commissioner. Carey also falsified another invoice that claimed the company was entitled to a tax return according to the evidence they compiled. When the return arrived in the mail, Carrie pocketed the money for herself. The fine, of course, helped the revenue commissioners get some of their money back. The court hearing ended, and Carrie left the building in disgrace. She submitted her resignation to DJ less than 6 months after the hearing and went to work on her own. Once again, Carrie's future was uncertain. All she had was her training as an accountant and her experience in sports. Legally, she'd have a hard time using one of those skills. Carrie could have gone into coaching or come out of retirement for a few years. She hinted at playing again in 2008, but never signed any contracts. Instead, Carrie decided to continue her accounting career. But since no accounting firm or company would hire her, Carrie had to get creative. So she founded Carrie's Fort Asset Estates, a financial firm that marketed itself as a vulture fund, but never actually bought any dying debts. As we said at the beginning, a vulture fund is what it sounds like. A fund that buys struggling debts like mortgages. Remember when we said she would tell clients that they could keep their house and Carrie would just charge them interest? An Irish chef named Sharon O'Riordan was one such client. Sharon worked for a hospital in Castletown, Ireland, cooking in their massive kitchens. But despite the steady work, Sharon admits that she got behind on her mortgage. Soon, she found herself in deep water with her lender. She was about to lose her home. Sharon spent many days in court fighting with her lender over the repossession. That's where she met a barrister who offered Sharon a solution to all her problems. The barrister mentioned a woman named Catriona Carey. They explained that Carey is an accountant offering a financial product to those in need, a bailout that benefits both parties. It almost sounded too good to be true, but Sharon was desperate, and the deal made sense. Vulture funds are pretty standard. Why couldn't one be helpful? Sharon contacted Carey and set up a meeting. Carey impressed Sharon when they met for the first time. She later told journalists for RTE, an Irish investigative media company, that Carey's handshake impressed her the most. It was a firm handshake. To Sharon, people who use a firm handshake are straightforward people that don't beat around the bush. In hindsight, Sharon views Carey as the exception. But at the time, Sharon found Carey personable and likable. Carey was also flexible during their negotiations. She initially asked for a $27,000 deposit from Sharon. Unfortunately, the hospital chef didn't have $27K. So, Carey said she'd settle for $5,400. Sharon assumed Carey was accepting a lower deposit because she wanted to help her out. However, Sharon didn't have $5K either. She had to ask her family to let her borrow the money. They gave her the much-needed funds, assuming that Carey's offer would save Sharon from financial ruin. In December of 2020, Sharon collected their money and handed every dollar over to Carey at the nearby hotel called the Midlands. After receiving the firm handshake, Sharon says she felt like the happiest person on earth as she drove home from the hotel. Carey promised to pay her back 30 days later. Carey's firm would buy her mortgage, and not long after, giving Sharon a new start in life. Sharon said it was like a Christmas miracle. The deal felt like a miracle when Sharon received an email in December 2020 from Carey's Fort telling her they've officially bought the old mortgage and were preparing new contracts set for signing by the end of January. Sharon didn't know it at the time, but she wasn't the only person to receive an email like this. There were several other Carey's Fort clients all across Ireland who expected new contracts. The email even specified that they'd finished structuring the written agreement by the end of January. Miriam and Philip Tormey, an Irish couple, read the same message from Carey's Fort. They had struck a similar deal with Carey, receiving the same kindness, understanding, flexibility, and firm handshake. Philip lost his job after the company he worked for collapsed. Philip and Miriam's finances, in turn, fell apart. They soon found themselves in the same court Sharon frequented. They happened to run into the same barrister who gave them the same tip. Go see Catriona Carey. She'll solve all your problems. The only difference between Miriam and Philip was that they could afford to pay the full deposit. Miriam's name wasn't on their mortgage papers, so she obtained a $21,000 loan from their credit union. Neither of them had ever received a loan this size and under such drastic circumstances. Nevertheless, as Miriam says, she trusted Philip, and Philip seemed to trust Carey. They all said they trusted Carey. All 18 victims. After the first emails in December, Sharon, Philip, Miriam, and 16 others didn't hear from Carey's Fort until after January 31st, the proposed deadline. Carey's Fort emailed their clients several times over the next few months with excuses and expected delays, but always promised that the contracts would be ready soon. Miriam recalls getting emails with the most tragic stories inside. She didn't know it at the time, but Carey, the formerly respected pro athlete, was telling her clients flat-out lies. She told her clients that the contracts were late one week because an employee had a brain hemorrhage. Then another employee got injured in a devastating car crash. Each excuse was more tragic than the previous one. Some clients became frustrated, others became skeptical. And only one client fully realized what was going on, though he found out by sheer luck. His name is Colin Finnegan. Colin gave Carrie $16,000 in deposit money after his parents' shop went under in 2019. He bought the property for his parents back in 2006, and they turned the building into a post office shop living space. However, when Colin's haulage business crumbled, he couldn't afford to pay the mortgage anymore. He needed help. That's when, like so many other desperate people, he found Carrie. She offered him the same deal she gave to the others, and Colin accepted it. He waited for his contract, never saw the papers. Only tragic excuses from Carrie's for it. Colin and his parents waited 18 months until something finally happened, though it wasn't what they were expecting. Colin was at his parents' shop one day when a man walked in saying he was interested in their property after seeing it on BidX1, a website that hosts online auctions for properties that have defaulted on their loans. But that was impossible. Carrie bought their loan. All they needed to do was sign a new contract with her. Colin, confused, contacted Carrie, who explained that they'd put the property up for auction a while back and someone bought it, though Carrie insisted her firm made the purchase. However, the new owners contacted Colin and said that his parents could remain on the property but would have to pay rent. Colin knew Carrie scammed him. He decided to let it go until he received an unexpected message from Carrie. The firm accidentally sent out the contact info for all their clients in a group message. Colin and the 17 other victims now had each other's contact information. He, along with Sharon, Philip, and Miriam, joined a WhatsApp group created by another victim, Andrew Hickey. The 18 victims shared their unique but very similar stories about meeting Carrie and acquiring her services. Eventually, their mutual experiences turned into an investigation into Carrie's Ford Asset Estates. RTE got their information from the 18 victims and shared it with local authorities. The police, in turn, arrested Carrie for fraud. The group chat was ecstatic, but in later interviews, they revealed the long-term effects of Carrie's scam. Miriam told RTE that her depression only got worse since Carrie entered her life. Like so many others, Miriam and Philip still had their mortgage to pay, plus the $26,000 Carrie stole from them. Others paid even loftier deposits. One couple handed Carrie nearly $38,000. The victims assumed that Carrie would be in jail by now for her crimes. Some estimates put her mortgage scam in the mid-six figures, but taking Carrie down is much more complicated than anyone anticipated. Some theorize that Carrie is receiving help from an associate of hers, Charles Allen, the Rodolphus Allen family trust manager. The trust has been under scrutiny over the past few years, with critics accusing Allen of exploiting people with distressed mortgages. Carrie's name was attached to that same fund in 2013. Their association came up again in March of 2022. An associate of Charles was photographed picking up Carrie from a mysterious home she was staying at, leading many to theorize that Charles is financially supporting Carrie. If that's the case, Carrie now has an alleged billionaire in her corner, and we all know how often they get convicted. Thanks to Charles, Carrie has been attending field hockey club activities like practices, scrimmages, and matches as she awaits her fate in an Irish court, which isn't looking good. Investigators are still getting complaints against Carrie and her firm. As of April 2022, there are over 30 such complaints filed by the local police. That's a number even Charles Allen might have trouble beating. In March of 2022, a scandalous document went viral on social media. It alleged that the famous Nigerian influencer Hush Puppy, who's currently behind bars in the US, managed to scam people online for $400,000. In reality, the document, which looked like it came from the FBI, was a forgery. Still, people believed it anyway. The United States government even issued a statement clarifying that the document was a fake and that Hush Puppy was not scamming people from jail. That's how powerful his reputation is. Before we dive into how Hush Puppy wound up in jail, a story you may know very well, let's talk about how he basically had the Nigerian Police Department in his back pocket. In February 2021, the FBI filed documents implicating Nigerian Police Chief Abba Kyari in a $20,000 bribe scheme, or the equivalent of 8 million Nigerian naira. The bribe stemmed from a scam gone south in which Hush Puppy tried to rip off one of his associates by not paying him what he was owed. The associate, Kelly Vincent, set up a meeting in Qatar between Hush Puppy, some other accomplices, and a gullible Qatari businessman. Hush Puppy arrived in Qatar and planned on scamming the wealthy businessman. If the scam worked out, Vincent expected a healthy commission. However, that meant everyone had to play their roles perfectly. Hush Puppy played a Wells Fargo banker from New York named Malik. His two accomplices played the finance guys. They helped assure the Qatari businessman that the investment was a guaranteed profit even though they were investing in a school. Hush Puppy said the school needed a little over $1.1 million. Once the businessman heard enough from the other finance guys, aka Hush Puppy's accomplices, he said yes to the offer. The businessman gave Hush Puppy the $1.1 million, who proceeded to launder the money by handing it off to several other associates. However, greed got the better of him. He sent Vincent some money, but not everything they agreed on. Upset, Vincent called the Qatari businessman and sang like a bird, telling him all about the scam. Hush Puppy was understandably upset and ordered the Nigerian police on his payroll to capture Vincent and keep him behind bars. He wired money into Abba's account, and the chief took care of the rest. Vincent spent a month in prison, even though nobody ever filed any charges. Instead, Hush Puppy kept paying the cops to keep the door locked. Hush Puppy's real name is Ramon Abbas. Despite being in jail for several major criminal charges, he still has a massive online following. His many followers are treated to hundreds of selfies of Hush Puppy standing in the most lavish and expensive-looking locations with exotic sports cars, private jets, and fine art perfectly placed in the background. Through his Instagram, Hush Puppy created a persona that embodied the flex culture. Every single one of Hush Puppy's posts, usually shot by an off-screen photographer, shows off his wealth in one way or another. Flex culture hasn't been around forever, and it'll forever be around. Plenty of people can't help but want to see that they can afford expensive clothes and toys by posting them online and being seen out in public. Hush Puppy went from being a shining example to a dedicated disciple of all things flex, a transition that ultimately led to his downfall. But how did Hush Puppy actually get famous? Where did he come from? In contrast to the wealth displayed on his Instagram, Hush Puppy grew up as a poor kid in Lagos, Nigeria, where he was born in 1982. We don't know much about Hush Puppy's childhood, except for the few times he mentioned it on Instagram, along with a few unreliable sources from Lagos. Hush Puppy usually describes his childhood as poverty-stricken, as do the neighbors who watched him grow up. His father drove a taxi, while his mother sold bread on the side of the busy roads. Meanwhile, Hush Puppy, then called Ramon, earned money by selling second-hand clothes and bread like his mom. He also made some cash by washing parked cars on the street. According to the few records available, Hush Puppy didn't obtain fame and fortune until his big move to Malaysia. According to him, he moved there to achieve a better life. And sure enough, after moving to Malaysia, Hush Puppy got rich out of nowhere. And he wasn't afraid to show off his newfound money. But you already knew that. Before long, Hush Puppy had gained a following. He was famous for being rich, leading many of his followers to ask how. The media wanted to know too. Unlike titans like Zuckerberg and Elon, Hush Puppy didn't have a corporate entity associated with his name. So a few media organizations started asking Hush Puppy for interviews. However, when journalists asked him how he earned his money, the flex culture enthusiast always gave the same vague answer: real estate development. However, there aren't any major real estate projects attached to Hush Puppy's name, nor any companies. The lack of records only helped to fuel Hush Puppy's Gucci-draped mythos. Hush Puppy's posts received praise from his adoring followers, who often left comments like Hush, as they sometimes called him, was their inspiration. They believed Hush Puppy built his luxurious lifestyle through smarts and, most importantly, hustle. The only people who didn't believe Hush Puppy's real estate mogul turned influencer persona were American federal investigators. They, along with international investigators and journalists, questioned the source of Hush Puppy's wealth and got some crazy answers in the process. A journalist from The Cable, a Nigerian media organization, visited the area where Hush Puppy, or Ramon as they knew him, grew up in Lagos. They interviewed a few of Hush Puppy's old neighbors who painted a different version of Hush Puppy than his millions of fans were familiar with. One neighbor, known to locals as Mama Deli, says Hush Puppy came by her home on occasion to beg for food. Mama Deli told the reporters that she only gave away food on credit, as she was strapped for cash just like everyone else in the neighborhood. She says Ramon ate her food several times without paying her back. He'd show up, hungry and pitiful looking, ask for more food, and leave with promises to pay her back. He kept that habit until one day, Mama Deli says Ramon stopped coming by. She didn't know it at the time, but he wasn't just avoiding his debts, he was working on a scam. The other neighbor The Cable interviewed chose to stay anonymous, but provided some interesting details on where Hush Puppy disappeared to. The anonymous neighbor says Ramon had access to a computer where he was becoming a Yahoo boy. The term is based on the email server Yahoo. People like Hush Puppy would send emails to the millions and millions of Yahoo email accounts, back when people still used them, to trick their victims into giving them money. The cable says they've investigated several Yahoo cases in Nigeria. They usually involve someone claiming to be an American soldier stranded in Africa, asking a fellow American for money to help get them back home. When Ramon first tried Yahoo scams, he was unsuccessful. The anonymous neighbor says he was only making a few bucks here and there. Young Ramon's fortunes changed when he traveled to South Africa and learned more effective Yahoo methods from pro scammers who lived there. The neighbor says Ramon returned to Lagos with the tools for success and started making some serious money. Mama Deli recalls seeing young Ramon turn up one day, cash in hand. He walked up to her house and paid off all his debts. Then she said Ramon paid her to cook up a batch of peppered catfish soup. As time went on, young Ramon's spending only got more lavish. Another neighbor said that even after Hush Puppy moved out of the area, he'd still send money back to his friends for food. He told them to buy rice, beans, oil, and deliver them all to his mom. Speaking of his mom, he also bought her a car. Ramon's mother, according to the other residents, knew her son dealt in some kind of illegal business. However, she didn't know what kind. When Ramon asked his brother Yusuf to join and become his business partner, their mom put her foot down. She wanted at least one son to have a legitimate career. Ramon still visited his old neighborhood from time to time, despite people like his mother not liking him all that much. By this point, most knew Ramon as Hush Puppy, and his wealth was famous online. The locals in Lagos considered Hush Puppy a billionaire and expected him to give money back to the community that raised him. Mama Deli remembers when Hush Puppy visited her for the last time in 2018. He pulled up in a nice car and they greeted each other enthusiastically. Then he gave her 5,000 naira, the equivalent of $12. Others in the neighborhood criticized Hush Puppy for only giving Mama Deli $12, but she told journalists she was happy to get it at all. It was probably because Hush Puppy gave almost nothing to the rest of his old neighborhood. A hotel owner asked Hush Puppy to buy his business, hoping the so-called billionaire could fix it up and turn the place into a high-end establishment. Hush Puppy refused. Hush Puppy's goals didn't include Lagos. They were much bigger than that. He wanted to be important and spend time with important people. He wanted to leave his origins behind, not revisit them by pumping money into it. And like Hush Puppy's childhood neighborhood, the Yahoo scams got too small for him. While traveling abroad, mainly in Malaysia, Hush Puppy participated in a few smaller scams until he reached his mid-20s. That's when Hush Puppy pulled off his two biggest and boldest scams of his illicit career. Unlike other fraudsters, Hush Puppy actually owned most of the expensive stuff he flexed online. Dealerships and jet companies have verified to inquiring journalists that Hush Puppy did in fact rent private planes, own Ferraris, Lambos, Rolls Royces, and the designer clothes he always had on. The flashy appearance inevitably attracted other new money individuals concerned with appearances. Most of them were European soccer players. Hush Puppy was good friends with English striker Tammy Abraham in particular. On Hush Puppy's 37th birthday, one of his last birthdays as a free man, Abraham told his big bro, "Happy birthday," in an Instagram post. Over time, Hush Puppy got to know other players and became well acquainted with Premier League social circles. Eventually, Hush Puppy and one of his business partners, Caleb Alumari, saw the Premier League as their next victim. His lawyer claims Hush Puppy earned his massive income from real estate development and being an influencer. In reality, Hush Puppy's fortune was built on BECs. In case you're unfamiliar, a BEC stands for Business Email Compromise. More specifically, it's when a hacker gets hold of a company's email address and tricks their customers into paying them money. For example, when Hush Puppy and Caleb tried scamming the Premier League, they first had to gain access to the organization's emails. Hush Puppy and his associates were supposedly working with hackers who had connections to state-sponsored hackers in North Korea. Once the hackers logged into the league's accounts, they could send emails to their contractors or people they did business with. Then they sent emails with new bank information and instructed the companies to pay their bills to this bank instead of the old one. Companies, blissfully unaware, obliged and sent whatever money they owed to the new account. Then Caleb cleaned the money from the bank account by laundering it through other accounts and businesses. Hush Puppy and Caleb's scam seemed smart. However, this particular scam was doomed from the beginning. They planned to steal $124 million from Premier League, an amount that most sports organizations was bound to notice. But up to that point, Hush Puppy had been undefeated in BEC scams. Experts believe the Nigerian influencer was getting cocky enough to try and pull off an impossible heist. They believe this hypothesis because of the Premier League fiasco and other brazen theft attempts he made in Malta. In February of 2019, the Bank of Valletta was cyber-attacked by the equivalent of a digital missile assault. The hackers savagely ripped and tore through the bank's systems, making off with around $14 million. Coincidentally, that's the same amount the FBI claims Hush Puppy tried to launder on the same date. Though the bank isn't named exclusively in the document, it would be a bizarre coincidence if the foreign financial institution described in the document isn't the same one in Malta. Whether it's a coincidence or not, Hush Puppy moved the stolen money to 4 different accounts spread across the world, and the FBI knew all about it. Thankfully, the bank traced the money and got it back into their customers' accounts. The FBI followed the money movements back to Hush Puppy by linking together texts he sent to Galeb. In the exchange, Hush Puppy asked Galeb if the money had come in yet. Galeb said yes, it was in Canada. Then, Hush Puppy asked for a screenshot, and Galeb said he'd send one after his flight. He never got the chance. FBI agents were there waiting for Galeb at the airport. Meanwhile, Hush Puppy was in Qatar, busy scamming the wealthy businessman. Hush Puppy and a few friends moved out to Dubai. One of those friends was an old pal from Lagos named Pak. Though Hush Puppy failed to give money to his Lagos community, he did, in fact, bring some of the community into his money. Hush Puppy tried to enjoy Dubai with his old friends, especially Pak. But during his vacation, Hush Puppy got 2 pieces of bad news. Galeb and another associate named Mamfa had been arrested at airports. Nevertheless, Hush Puppy was business as usual, posting pics in front of sports cars and snapping on boats with Dubai's skyline dominating the background. The fun ended on June 8, 2020 at about 1 in the morning. Pak was watching TV when a team of Dubai SWAT agents erupted through the door and ordered him to lay on the ground. They went upstairs to Hush Puppy's bedroom and found him in his bed, dazed and confused, probably wondering why a bunch of armed soldiers were in his suite. They arrested every individual staying with Hush Puppy, then asked them where the money was. Eventually, they found Hush Puppy's stash. It included 21 laptops, 47 phones, $7 million worth of exotic cars, and $40 million in cash. No criminal wants to be extradited to the United States. But after Dubai police found the evidence in his suite, U.S. officials had more than enough to extradite him to an American jail. As of April 2022, Hush Puppy is awaiting trial and conviction for a laundry list of fraud. In other words, his passionate fans may not see him for a while. As for Chief Abba, he pled guilty to multi-million-dollar fraud charges in August 2021 and faced up to 20 years in jail. Then, things got even worse. Abba was caught working with a drug smuggling ring after the Hush Puppy saga. Now the ex-chief faces even more jail time. Robert Rizzo, the city administrator of Bell, California, made a staggering $787,000 a year. For reference, the U.S. president only makes $400,000 a year. The leader of the free world has slightly more responsibility than the administrator of Bell, California, so clearly something is up here. And that was just the first year of his scam. He gave himself a yearly 12% raise, so the last year he was in office, he made $1.5 million. Before the entire scam came tumbling down, Rizzo's exorbitant salary became public knowledge, and he actually had the nerve to defend it. He said if that's a number people choke on, maybe he's in the wrong business. He could go into a private business and make that kind of money. He believed the council compensated him for the job he had done. Basically, he argued he could be making even more money, so everyone should just shut up about it. It's also worth noting that Rizzo never made anywhere close to that much money working in the private sector. Not only did Rizzo get a suspiciously high salary, but he got some interesting benefits as well. Rizzo got 28 weeks off per year by combining his paid vacation, sick time, and personal time. That's 7 months a year. He was out of the office more than he was in the office. And if he had gotten away with everything, the money would have kept on rolling even after he quit because he had set up an $880,000 per year pension for himself. Where did all this money come from? Well, like most government salaries and programs, it came from taxes. But to afford all of this, the city of Bell almost doubled taxes for sewer, trash, and other public services without any voter approval. A scandal of this proportion was possible because of Bell's unique demographics. Bell is a small suburb of LA that only covers 2.5 square miles. 38,000 people live there, and it's one of the poorer cities in LA County. About 1 in 6 residents live below the poverty line. In 2009, Bell's per capita income was only $25,000 a year. 90% of residents are Hispanic or Latino, most of whom don't have a high school degree. But perhaps the biggest factor that allowed this level of corruption was that Bell is a charter city. Bell City became a charter city without anyone really noticing. The ballot measure didn't get much attention, but by becoming a charter city, Bell became exempt from salary regulations set by the state. After that, they were free to pay themselves whatever they wanted. Bell was, unfortunately, the perfect target for something like this. There isn't much to Bell to begin with. There are only 2 commercial strips. One has small mom-and-pop stores, and the other has some chains. The mayor owned a liquor store, and that was across the street from an elementary school, which says something about the state of the city. The highlight was perhaps the park, which has elliptical machines that anyone can use. Public officials pointed at the park to defend their non-existent accomplishments anyway. How many elliptical machines does someone need to justify a salary that's double what the president makes? The people of Bell were either unaware of the problem or too scared to speak up. An NPR article covering the scandal said that one woman they found at the park wouldn't talk to them because she lived in public housing and was scared of getting kicked out if she criticized the government. Many people in Bell also either work for the city, receive some kind of welfare, or are not U.S. citizens. These are the kinds of people who could potentially be punished the hardest by corrupt government officials. Bell was a shady politician's dream come true. Before Rizzo and the other officials started this whole scam, Bell was not a city that got much attention from the LA Times or any other news outlet. There are 88 cities in LA County with endless water boards, school districts, and thousands of other places to focus on. Bell just flew under the radar, lost in one of the densest places in America. Even a paper the size of the LA Times has to pick and choose what they look into. They don't have unlimited finances to look everywhere, especially now that advertisers are shifting so much of their spending away from print news media. At the time, the paper's corporate parent, the Tribune Co., was in bankruptcy court, and the Times staff was cut in half. They weren't exactly in tip-top shape to go around doing hardcore investigative journalism and exposing corruption. This could be another reason why the Bell officials got away with it for as long as they did. Nobody ever came snooping. The ridiculous salaries and other corruptions were eventually discovered largely thanks to reporter Reuben Vives, who started his career as a copy boy. Vives discovered the story almost by accident. The neighboring city of Maywood needed money, so they wanted Bell to take over their city services like policing. A colleague of Vives learned of an investigation into the pay of Bell City Council members. Their attention landed on Bell, and they asked for public documents on salary. They had to call the city clerk in Bell every day to ask for the documents, and they only got them after threatening to sue the city. The day that they finally got the documents was unusual. Vives had to go and meet Rizzo in person at a conference room near the park. 9 city officials and lawyers accompanied him for what should have been a routine interview. Vives and other reporters eventually figured out what was going on. Only 400 people voted in the 2005 decision to make Bell a charter city. New city commissions gave council members swanky new jobs that paid way more than they did before. Vives and the LA Times also got some help from locals. One of these locals, an anonymous writer who goes by the pen name Pedro Paramo, had actually been blogging about corruption in Bell for years. But his audience was so small that he got nowhere. His true identity is unknown, and whenever he appeared in public, he wore a luchador mask. Not all heroes wear capes, we guess. These are the eccentric, dedicated people who tend to get involved in local level politics. And in this case, it's a good thing they did. People at the LA Times said Paramo gave them lots of tips. Other citizens attempted to get involved in the past unsuccessfully. People went to City Hall to ask their own questions, trying to understand why taxes were suddenly through the roof. But this never got anywhere. City officials gave them the runaround and continuously told angry citizens that they would get back to them. Of course, they never actually got back to them. How deep did this local government conspiracy go? It involved a lot more people than just Rizzo. The Bell City Police Chief, Randy Adams, became heavily involved. When Rizzo hired him, he claimed to suffer from back, knee, and neck injuries. The day he was hired, he declared himself to be disabled. The disability status would have given him millions of tax-free pension dollars. Under the agreement, he would have received lifetime disability whenever he wanted to retire. The pension was $400,000 a year. It would have been the 3rd biggest in the California state pension system. The disability was, of course, totally fake. Adams took spin classes and ran in the Glendale Downtown Dash, a 5K race. When he applied for the job of Orange County Sheriff, he wrote on his application that he liked to ski and had been in the 120-mile Baker to Las Vegas relay run. These are all things that would be very difficult to do if you were so disabled that you could not perform any police duties. Adams' salary was $457,000, almost double that of the LAPD chief. For reference, the LAPD chief oversees almost 13,000 employees. Bell's police department had 48. In some of Adams' leaked emails, the conspiracy became even more painfully clear. He had emailed back and forth with the assistant city manager and discussed how they would arrange his wild salary so that the tax-paying citizens wouldn't find out about it. Adam wrote in one email, "I'm looking forward to seeing you and taking all of Bell's money." The mayor of Bell, Oscar Hernandez, defended all of these absurd salaries. He told the people of Bell that the salaries were in line with similar positions over the period. Completely untrue, of course, but that was his excuse. He also accused the LA Times of skewing the facts. Hernandez was recalled, then arrested, and then indicted on fraud and a few other charges. The corrupt officials of Bell had other means of getting money besides just inflated salaries. They came up with other roundabout ways to send themselves money. The city dealt a lot with businesses owned by Dennis Tarango, who just so happened to be one of Rizzo's business partners. The city paid his companies more than $10 million, and they continued to pay them even after their contracts had technically expired. One audit revealed that one time Tarango sent a blank invoice to the city for $20,000, and they paid it. Corruption this blatant can only go on for so long. In September 2010, Rizzo and most of the city council were arrested and charged with misappropriation of public funds. Mayor Hernandez refused to answer the door when the police came for him, and the sheriff's department had to use a battering ram and bring him out in handcuffs. Rizzo had to turn in his passport and wear an electronic monitoring device. Since his resignation, Rizzo has continued to request that the city of Bell pay his legal bills. Yes, he was trying to take even more money from the city. He has also claimed, incredibly, that the city owes him back pay. A non-corrupt councilman said Rizzo resigned without severance pay. He wouldn't even get a penny cut in half. Rizzo's drama continued during his preliminary hearing. He claimed to feel lightheaded and was experiencing chest pain. Paramedics carried him out on a stretcher. He was released from the hospital the next day and ended up sleeping through a good portion of his actual hearing. The reporter who broke the story, Vives, became a local celebrity in Bell. People recognize him and take pictures with him when he visits. He can't even get a drink without someone stepping in and buying it for him. A group of heartless people may have run the city for way too long, but thanks to people like Vives and the luchador hero of Bell, these corrupt politicians will rot in prison for years to come. Rizzo was sentenced to 12 years in prison and will be paying back the people of Bell for the rest of his miserable life.
In August of 2021, an anonymous staff member from Yale told school officials that a high-ranking administrator was stealing millions. They claimed the thief was responsible for suspiciously large orders of computer devices through the school's accounts. The administrator named in the anonymous tip was Jamie Petrone. Petrone was the director of finance and administration for the Department of Emergency Medicine at Yale. If you scrolled through her and her husband's Instagram, you'd think she was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. His posts show off the couple's expensive possessions. Petrone's husband, Jameis Codrington, particularly enjoyed showing off their collection of cars. The collection included a Dodge Charger, a red and black Land Rover SV, a black Escalade Premium, a red Mercedes-Benz convertible, and a white Mercedes G-Wagon. These expensive vehicles were often parked in one of Petrone's 3 homes, all in Connecticut, a state famous for its high-end real estate market. She also bought a $588,000 5-bed, 5-bath house in Lithia Springs, Georgia. When Petrone wasn't in one of her 4 expensive homes or driving her luxury cars, she walked around town in designer clothes. Her favorite brand? Louis Vuitton. Petrone owned a Louis V purse, which matched her $1,500 pair of Louis V ankle boots. She also had another Louis Vuitton bag worth $5,000. Codrington, Petrone's husband, bought diamond bracelets, necklaces, and expensive clothes like jerseys, sneakers, and sunglasses. Together, the couple went on lavish trips around the world. One photo on their Instagram showed them dining at Gucci Garden, a famous restaurant in Florence, Italy. Petrone also flaunted her wealth by hosting dinners and lunches for her family. An Instagram post shows Petrone posing with members of her extended family inside what looks like a very nice kitchen. Her family, including Codrington, thought Petrone earned her fortune from an electronic side hustle called Maziv Entertainment that grew beyond expectations. However, Petrone never considered quitting her administration job at Yale, despite the business's success. No one knew Yale was her supplier. Not even Yale. Like any other 21st century university, Yale's campus needs computers to run. The school allowed certain employees to order things like computers, laptops, and tablets for whatever needs arose. However, they placed a $10,000 limit on IT equipment orders. If an administrator wanted to order anything over $10,000, they needed approval from a supervisor. But the limit didn't apply to how many orders you could file at one time. In theory, the limit was practical. In reality, it was utterly useless, and no Yale employee recognized the loophole more than Patron. Yale is a 320-year-old school with $42 billion in assets and over 4,000 academic staff members. Their main concern isn't budgeting, but providing the best academic experience possible for their students. That's why it took nearly a decade for anyone to notice Patron was robbing the school blind. Patron bought her first load of tech devices in 2013. The Yale administrator used her position to buy the latest trend in personal computers, the tablet. iPads were all the rage in the early 2010s and sold like rectangle-shaped hotcakes at retailers like Best Buy. Patron had already found a retail company in New York that needed more tablets. She then filed an order through the university for just under $10,000 worth of iPads and Microsoft Surface Pros, and bought them with Yale's money. Since Patron was an administrator for the School of Medicine, she classified the order as necessary IT medical equipment. However, when the medical equipment arrived, Patron took the tablets home with her, then sold the shipment to the retailer on Long Island for a 100% profit. There was one catch. Patron needed to trick the retailer, who couldn't know that her products were coming from Yale. So, to look legit to a retailer in New York, Patron used her husband's company, Massive Entertainment, to receive payments. According to investigators, Patron wasn't satisfied with the one deal. She wanted more. So Patron kept ordering more IT equipment, making the same sub-$10,000 orders over and over again. By 2014, Patron basically ran her own personal Best Buy. The school didn't suspect anything, nor did the retailer question their Connecticut supplier. To them, they were buying hot products from a company called Massive Entertainment. At least, that's what their financial records said. In reality, they were buying iPads stolen from Yale, the alma mater of presidents and renowned medical professionals. Meanwhile, Massive Entertainment was doing well. Codrington founded the company in 2003, according to his LinkedIn page. Even though his wife and former business partner is currently on trial, Massive Entertainment is still going strong. Codrington still posts regularly on their Instagram page. But the company's best years by far were during the 8-year period from 2013 to 2021. Patron sold thousands of tablets over that 8-year period. By 2021, she had stolen around $40 million worth of tablets, all on Yale's dollar. And as you already know, she made no effort to hide her illicit success. But because the sudden influx of wealth came in under the guise of Massive Entertainment, no one suspected anything. Codrington, the self-proclaimed CEO of Massive, is also a self-proclaimed hustler. His Instagram, which doubles as his business page, makes Codrington's priorities quite clear. His bio says his name is Jamisi, aka Coach C. He also refers to himself as an artist in every aspect and a football coach. Codrington then claims he's living that jet life, followed by 3 airplane emojis. The Instagram page, @Massive has a feed filled with evidence of Codrington's clients, including gentlemen's clubs, bars, and models, some of whom pose in front of the white G-Wagon allegedly bought with funds from Patron's tablet smuggling operation. In a way, Codrington and his business were a front for what was really going on. Though Codrington, as of April 2022, hasn't been charged with any crimes related to his wife's schemes, but he and Massive Entertainment still serve their own unique purpose, keeping the retailer, their family, their friends, and most important of all, the police, off their scent. Meanwhile, back at Yale, a few people noticed the high volume of orders coming from Patron's department. In June 2020, someone finally asked her why she was ordering so many iPads. When Yale officials asked her why, Patron explained away the issue. She said her department needed a significant equipment upgrade. The Yale officials, preoccupied with bigger pandemic problems, accepted the simple explanation and moved on. Their aloofness allowed Patron to continue her operation for 13 more months before the anonymous tip came in and brought the entire house down. The anonymous tipper has never been identified. They were likely someone from Patron's department or someone who worked close to her. They saw the abnormally frequent orders and allegedly saw Patron stuffing tablets in the trunk of her car. Yale's financial auditor sifted through Patron's order history once the tip came in. they discovered that Patron had millions of dollars worth of computer equipment, way more than her department could ever use in a lifetime. The Yale auditors handed the information over to local authorities, and when the police saw Patron's order history, they knew something suspicious was going on. In 2021 alone, Patron ordered an absurd amount of equipment. Records show that on May 26, 2021, Patron told an employee to start filing an order for 100 Microsoft Surface Pros. Patron said the tablets were for a new study, launching on Memorial Day weekend. Like the Yale officials, the employee didn't think much about it and divided a chunk of the massive order into 12 separate purchase orders for 8 tablets each. Each order was worth a little over $9,000, just enough to fly under the limit's radar. The employee filed the rest in 4 other purchase orders for $4,500 each. When Patron got the shipment in, she turned around and sold the tablets for $71,000 to her buyer in Long Island. In addition to Patron's order history, investigators also found shady-looking bank statements on her account. Patron applied for a PayPal loan that year and used her smuggling capital as collateral. Investigators used the information from PayPal to obtain bank statements that displayed 4 months' worth of lavish spending. The statements and order history were enough for authorities to arrest Patron in September. Prosecutors charged Patron with wire fraud, mail fraud, and money laundering. All combined, Patron faces a maximum sentence of 23 years behind bars. She pleaded guilty to all charges and was released on $1 million bail by a judge in New Haven, Connecticut. Patron's plea agreement, the only reason she got out on bail, bled her dry. She forfeited her $560,000 in cash, though the money had already been seized from Mazif's Entertainment's bank accounts, along with 6 of the many high-end cars she and Codrington owned. As for Patron's 3 homes in Connecticut, she agreed to sell them and hand the proceeds over to Yale as restitution. Patron agreed to sell her Georgia home, listing it for $580,000. Besides Yale, some of these proceeds and seizures went to the government. Patron never reported any of her income to the IRS, which lost out on over $6 million in tax revenue. Patron cooperated while awaiting her sentencing from the New Haven courts. No one's sure how many years she'll get, though one law expert doesn't think Patron will get the max sentence. The expert, ironically, is from Yale. Kate Stith, a leading professor at Yale Law School, still thinks Patron will receive a relatively long prison sentence due to the massive amount of money she stole. Stith bases her opinion on years of experience as a federal prosecutor in Manhattan. Nevertheless, since Patron doesn't have a prior criminal offense, Professor Stith doesn't think she'll get 23 years. Regardless of Patron's sentencing, both Yale and the government will probably never get all their money back, since Patron spent some of her illicit gains on travel, food, and fashion items that immediately depreciate in value after you buy them. There wasn't much money left to return. Now, the university can only look back and ask the all-important question: where were Yale's accountants from 2013 to 2021? A spokeswoman for Yale responded by announcing an investigation into their accounting department to identify and correct gaps in its internal finance controls. We know how Patron stole 8 figures from one of the most prestigious universities in America. Perhaps one day we'll learn how it took them 8 years to notice. Click to watch one of these next videos and let us know in the comment section whether or not you think going to college is worth the money today.